Greetings to everybody. Now in today's video I want to discuss a common argument that is thrown against the Prophet Muhammad and the religion of Islam, and that has to do with the Jewish tribe of Bani Qurayza. You know the argument that is often brought up that the Prophet Muhammad slaughtered 800 innocent Jews and he completely destroyed this Jewish tribe, which proves that he's anti-Semitic and evil, etc., etc. I'm sure you've all heard this argument before, and even if you're a non-Muslim, I'm sure you have probably even used this argument to try to disprove Islam and so forth. But now, with any situation, we always have to examine context, and we always have to examine whether the facts stand up to the reality. And when we examine this case, we will find that the facts do not represent the claims that are being made. So let us analyze this situation. Now, if anybody studies the history of the Prophet Muhammad, they will know that when he entered the city of Medina, he made a peace treaty, a constitution with the Jews, and this included the Bani Qurayza tribe. Now the Muslims and the Jews made a treaty. They agreed that each party would have their own religion. They agreed that the Jews and the Muslims would be one community. So much for anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic, all of that nonsense. And they agreed that neither party, the Muslims nor the Jews, would aid each other's enemies. Basically, the Muslims wouldn't aid the enemies of the Jews, and the Jews wouldn't aid the enemies of the Muslims. And anybody who breaks this treaty will be punished. You get that? They all agreed to this. Anybody who betrays the other party will be punished. Now, the Battle of the Trench. If anybody studies Islamic history, they will know that the pagans eventually decided to attack the city of Medina, and this is known as the Battle of the Trench. Now the Muslims were at war with the pagans of Mecca, which is a city beside Medina, and the pagans decided to attack Medina with 10,000 mercenaries, and the Muslims knew that it would be very difficult to fight such an army. So the Muslims came up with a plan, and that was to build a trench at the north of Medina. And this is why the battle is called the Battle of the Trench. Now the reason why the Muslims built the trench at the north was because east and west of Medina was surrounded by rocky hills and tree fields. So it would have been very difficult for the pagans to attack from those sides. And at the south, it was also rocky hills, and you also had the Jewish tribes who had a treaty with the Muslims. So the only open route was the north. So this is why the Muslims made the trench at the north. Now the pagans were unable to break through. They were like sitting ducks. Every time they went into the trench, they didn't come back out. They had a few skirmishes, and they realized that, you know what, we can't break through. So the pagans came up with a plan. They sent one of their men to the ranks of the Jewish tribe. They sent one of their men to the tribe of Bani Qurayza. And this pagan managed to persuade the Jewish leader of the Bani Qurayza tribe to join the battle. And guess what? The Jewish leader agreed. He broke the treaty. He broke the constitution. This was the ultimate act of treachery, because now the Muslims were surrounded by the north with the pagans, and they were surrounded in the south by the Jewish tribe of the Bani Qurayza. Now the Muslims became very worried because their families and their homes were left unprotected, because they were all in the north and their homes were still left unprotected. Nobody was protecting the family, and this meant that their family could be attacked by the Jewish tribe from the south at any moment. And this is exactly what the plan was. The plan was to attack the Muslims from the south and the pagans to attack from the north. they eventually wanted to overwhelm the Muslims, because it would have been impossible for the Muslims to keep out 10,000 soldiers from the north and at the same time fight at the south and protect their homes from the Jews in the south. So they would have been overwhelmed and they would have fallen apart and they would have been destroyed. So this was the ultimate act of treachery. Nobody ever mentions this, that the Jewish tribe broke the treaty. But now the Prophet Muhammad came up with a plan, and as he said, war is deception. The Prophet Muhammad sent one Muslim to infiltrate the ranks of the Jews and the ranks of the pagan. Now this Muslim, he managed to create distrust and enmity between the pagans and the Jews. Furthermore, a sandstorm happened. As you know, the desert full of sandstorms happen, and luckily a sandstorm took place, and the pagans decided, you know what, this is a bad sandstorm, this battle isn't going anywhere, plus the Jews are not helping us. And they said that because the Muslim created this distrust between the pagans and the Jews, which was a very smart tactic. So eventually the pagans decided to retreat. They lost the battle. But now, was the battle over? No, it was not. Now the Muslims had to carry out justice against the Bani Qurayza because they broke the treaty. Now when the Muslims arrived at the forts of Bani Qurayza, when they arrived, the Bani Qurayza were insulting and they were asking for a fight with the Muslims. Instead of asking for mercy and forgiveness for betraying the treaty and the constitution, no, the Jewish tribe were insulting the Muslims and they were still asking for a fight. They still wanted to battle. So it's not like they were repentful or remorseful over what they did. They didn't have any sorrow for betraying the Muslims. Now eventually the Muslims besieged the forts of Bani Qurayza. They besieged them. The Bani Qurayza had no way out. So they came up with a plan. Everybody came up with a plan. And this plan was that, okay, you know what? We let this man judge the Bani Qurayza. Because you know, in Arab culture, the Bani Qurayza, they had allies. They were allies with the tribe who are now allies with the Muslims. And basically these allies, these are like the middlemen. These middlemen came to the Prophet Muhammad and they said, you know what, let us deal with the Bani Qurayza in a just manner. They used to be our allies, so you know we have to help them out a bit. So let one man from our tribe judge them. The Prophet Muhammad agreed, and the Jewish tribe of Bani Qurayza agreed. So, did you get that? A former ally of the Bani Qurayza said, let one of our men judge them, since we used to be allies, since we are on good terms. And the Jewish tribe agreed. The Bani Qurayza said, this is very good, we accept it, we will let this man judge us. Now this man who judged them was Sa'd. His name is Sa'd, and he was a former Jew. He's basically a Jew by culture. So what did he decide? He punished the Jews by their own law. This is what they never tell you. This is what the critics of Islam never tell you. That the Jewish tribe were judged by their own law. Deuteronomy chapter 20 verses 10 to 14. When you besiege a town, kill all the men, but leave the women and children alive. And this is exactly what this man did. He judged them by their own law. So when people claim that Islam is barbaric for what it did to Bani Qurayza, they're not attacking Islam, they're attacking the Bible. Because this ruling is from the Bible. This is what the Jews believe. So I get it. When the Jews do this to other people, it's okay. But when the Jews are judged by their own law, then it becomes evil and barbaric. So to put an end to this case, No crime was committed. The Jews broke the treaty. The Jews accepted the judgment, and they were judged by their own Bible.